Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the Sensitive Stability BPD Live Show. For those of you who don't know me, I am your host, Kevin Reynolds. I am a BPD survivor and a BPD coach. We go live here on TikTok Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST, talking about a different topic related to BPD each morning. Good morning, everyone. Today's topic is splitting. We have to go over splitting every once in a while. A lot of different questions end up coming up. So Sensitive Stability Coach, our moderator, and my best friend in the chat here can help you be seen or heard if you have a question. It's appropriate to pin them earlier than normal because splitting is one of those very broad topics. And to make the show different from all the past splitting shows, I totally welcome comments, questions earlier. That said, what is splitting? From the surface level, splitting is as simple as black and white thinking. That's how we would describe that. That's how we would define it. Now, those of us who have BPD and have split before know that it's a little bit more serious and a little bit more involved than just black and white thinking. Basically, it's going from thinking something's really, really good to really, really bad, but it does change our entire behavior. It changes our whole thought process. It changes how we feel and think about other people, places, ideas, organizations, ourselves. Yes, you can split on things besides people, and you can also split on yourself. It's possible to split on basically anything. A good example that might be easily understood by everyone is splitting on a job, for example, or a career, right? Or a place of employment. Doesn't even have to be the job itself. Something could have happened at work that created some type of embarrassment, and then we split. So when you really start getting into it, splitting is more than just black and white thinking. It's kind of a survival technique, right? It's like a survival technique. We are doing it to survive whatever scenario or perceived threat we happen to come across. And I say perceived threat for a reason. Perceived because it's not always a real threat. Sometimes we just think it's a real threat. That's important because you are curating a life around you of which is controlled by these coping mechanisms. And in a sense, you are being controlled by this condition and you don't even realize it. And that's because the condition is so excellent at creating depression and anxiety and apathy and emptiness if you don't get what you want, that it makes sense to do the inappropriate coping mechanisms, right? One of which is splitting. Somebody says something that you don't like, could be a really close friend, could be somebody that you've known for years and years and years. Sometimes it's easier to ditch that friend, no matter how good of a friend they might be, than it is to just fix whatever it is that they need you to fix. You know what I mean? This is one of those mornings I got to change this light color, man. Sometimes it's like, it kills me, and I know it's darker, and I'm sorry about that, but sometimes I can't take it in the morning. And I forgot to pull the blinds up too, so it's going to consistently be this dark the entire show. But anyways, splitting. So you might split on someone for a perceived wrongdoing, but here's the thing. In your mind, it will be the reason that the friendship ended, and it will always, very commonly, we put the blame on whoever or whatever it is. Oh, well, that job didn't appreciate me, so I quit. And normally one of the indicators that you're in a split is the rapid change. Normally it's a rapid change of thought or idea about something, right? So you don't just over the course of time decide that this thing is bad for you based on a foundation of solid evidence. Instead, the BPD brain will just flip like a light switch, and it will immediately cut this person out and say, well, that job never appreciated me. They never paid me. I never got any of the proper reward that I deserve for the hard work that I put in. That might be true if it was over the course of time, but just yesterday you were saying, I love my job. I'm so good at this. You know what I mean? That's a split, and that's how you see that you're in one. It happens rapidly. For instance, in coaching, I see splits all the time, just like a therapist would or a doctor would, right? Trying to treat us, and I'll see a split. Sometimes even on me, I'll tell somebody something I know that they need to hear or I know that they need to do. Turns out it's much easier to split on someone who's given you good advice than it is to take the good advice. And in the moment, your brain, thank you, Jill. Good morning, everybody. You're in the moment, your brain is not as logical as it normally is. You have a rise of emotional chemicals that are helping you make decisions. I say helping. What I really mean is they're destroying your decision-making process, okay? Because you're ditching logic altogether and pragmatic thought in exchange for making decisions just based on how you feel. And that's the wrong way to make decisions most of the time, because our feelings do not account for the logic. And the logic is what dictates the consequences and the results in the future. Oh, hi, Elizabeth. And I don't know what your kid's name is, but hello there. Thanks for tuning in this morning. And thanks for keeping your mother here, too. It's a good place for everybody to be, that's for sure. We flip so quickly that sometimes we create the consequence embarrassment. And that embarrassment is hard to burden. It's hard to bear. So we will run. I have literally had an episode and then split on an entire state more than once in my lifetime. And by state, I mean place of living. And I have moved to across the country, basically, to avoid the consequences, which in my head were judgment and the embarrassment of having to reintegrate with the people around me. Sometimes I've had an episode so bad, I would literally go rent a U-Haul, and I'd be packed and gone by the nightfall of the next day. People would come back and it'd be like a ghost town, My house would just be empty. And they'd be thinking, what the hell? It was filled with stuff. But I would bail that quickly. I would bail that fast. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for taking care of us and helping us promote the live. I really do appreciate that. I can't tell you enough. Things really flow, and it's partly because of Jill here and the people that give. I would never be able to pump as much into the advertising for this as we do. That said, I want you to think the next time that you have gone from thinking something was great 5 minutes ago to all of a sudden thinking that things are terrible. I want you to question yourself and ask, is this a split? And it's important to identify. It doesn't mean that you're wrong necessarily, because there could be some good splits. Splitting on a bad influence, for example. Not a bad idea. Amber says, my daughter was just diagnosed and it's a roller coaster right now. Well, Amber, firstly, I encourage you very much so to reach out to me. I work with a lot of parents and their children of all ages. The youngest that I've worked with is 8 years old. It's a little tough before they're 12, but I have done it. And that is something I do. I don't know how old they are. If they're already an adult, that's fine too. Many parents find me. I know it's not easy in the beginning, especially because you're, trying to figure out what's going on and you're diving into this kind of world and everything starts to make sense, of course. You're probably listening to me saying, well, this sounds a lot like my daughter. This sounds a lot like, my kid, right? And I'm sorry for that. But the good news is we are very special people in the best of ways. And we have a lot of talents, a lot of abilities, a lot of skills, a lot of love and empathy and passion that other people just don't have. A special kind of drive exists inside. We just have to get over these negative coping mechanisms and figure out how to replace them with things that actually push us forward in the right direction. And life gets a whole lot better. I mean, it really does. Good to see you, Sil. What if the BPD person stays and is immature, annoying, petty, pity party? BPD or MPD. I would say that's more on the BPD side for sure. BPD people, but they're both cluster B, and you can kind of bounce back and forth. I actually got diagnosed with both, and that is because BPD was my primary situation. But when I would split, which is perfectly on topic, into a narcissist sometimes to avoid having to deal with something, I would go from this extremely empathetic, passionate person who really wants to people please and really needs this person's opinion to know what I feel about myself, to completely expelling them and deciding that this person needs to be out of my life, and I would have no empathy or sympathy for them whatsoever. So you got to bounce back and forth. I would say that the victim mentality happens on both sides, but on the narcissist side, it typically comes out more as blame. They're focusing on the blaming you. They're still a victim, but they're blaming you. On the BPD side, it's more a woe is me, the pity party side, right? Everything is my fault. Why would you ever want to be with me? I'm worthless. I'll never amount to anything. That's more of the BPD side. I would say that there's a certain amount of validation that is okay sometimes in those scenarios, but most of the time it's inappropriate to give them validation in those moments. Instead, I usually focus on trying to be the example. Somebody says, my life is so terrible, and I say, yeah, I get it. I remember when my life was terrible. Oh my God, it was hard to get out. My heart goes out to you, but I believe in you. I believe you can do it. And the truth is, they can do it. But they have to be challenged sometimes, right? Jessica Blackburn. Jessica asks about cheating and BPD. How does it relate to splitting? That's a good one. That's a really good one. So not everybody with cluster B cheats, but it is a coping mechanism like all the other coping mechanisms. You kind of select your coping mechanisms based on your experiences and the life that you've lived, right? You're curating based on your memory and what you've experienced. So cheating falls into the need for attention, the need for intimacy, the need for affection. And if we feel like our partner isn't giving us enough, there are some of us who have developed the cheating coping mechanism, of which we will just get attention from whoever will give it to us. And that could be, it could really be anybody. Usually it's somebody that's already in their life, but I mean, it really could be anybody. Unsafe, unprotected intimacy falls in that same kind of category. And I would say that it is more likely to occur and does occur more during, a split. So it starts out with, this person doesn't love me, this person doesn't care, they don't give me any attention. What's the point? Who cares, right? And it ends up with them getting attention from somebody else. And it sucks, but the answer is not to give them more attention to prevent cheating. The answer is to challenge them to get better. That's always going to be the answer. Remember that you can't control other people. No matter how much you might want to, you can't. You can only control yourself. You can only be the example, for instance, and do right no matter what. And you could choose to trust, but you could also have dignity and self-respect and know when it's time to back out. Mrs. Potts. I like saying that for some reason. Mrs. Potts. All right. Why does someone with BPD continue to remain unhealed, refusing any treatment? It is because we have surrounded ourselves with these protective measures that I have been calling coping mechanisms, survival techniques, defense mechanisms, all synonyms for the same thing, just behaviors and ideas, and thank you, Sil. Been a while since I've seen that one, of which keep us safe. Bad things happen usually for us very early in life, and we saw the evil out there really at a really young age. So as an adult, we have tightened all the valves as much as we can to try to avoid getting hurt. So that includes anything that might, thank you for that, change our, if we feel like our coping mechanisms are being threatened, and our coping mechanisms is all we know, usually it's being a victim, trying to get sympathy in order to get affection and attention. If that is threatened, it's easier sometimes to run and we definitely don't want to change it, and we're masters at manipulating the environment in a way where we're always the victim, and that's just the truth. I know that a lot of us hate to hear that, especially those who are running from that truth. Bruce says, what are some good, healthy coping skills when splitting? Okay, well, first of all, when I was on the mission to get better, I'll tell you right now that I no longer have splits. That doesn't occur. If I have a split, it's a choice. And it's a choice based on data. So it's really just a decision, that's founded in historical evidence, which is one of the skills that you need to learn in order to get out of a splitting lifestyle. That is that I have to be able to look at the data, the historical data leading up to my change in feelings. First, I have to notice that there's a change. I really hate this person. When I say something extremely polar, right? When I say, I really don't like this, like, what is the deal? I look back in the history and I say, well, how did I feel a couple hours ago? So I identify that maybe I'm having a shift in how I feel about something. I then strip the emotions out of it. I strip all emotions out of it and I look at only the facts, only the data. Well, this person did this person did that for me, they did this for me, they've always been there, I've known them this long, we always talk about doing this, we want the same stuff, whatever, we have the same friends, and I've always liked this person classically, right? And then I ask myself, I identify the trigger point. What was it that changed my perspective overnight? What was it? Then I break that down and I analyze that. I look for the intention. I look for for having empathy. It's important that I look for their intention because a lot of times the things that we think are happening, they never intended on hurting us or upsetting us. That's not the point, right? And that changes it for me enough to where I can avoid and sidestep the split. I also make no actions that I put in the reaction category as much as possible. Instead, I focus on responses, which takes time. That takes time and work. Martha, good morning to you. I find it hard to control myself. There is no time in between trigger and bad coping. Damn this TikTok stuff here. All right. Threats and impulsivities. Yeah, so it may appear that way, Martha. That's what I'm going to start with. It may appear that way. But generally speaking, there is always a buildup, even if you haven't identified it and can't see it. It's there, okay? Usually, these things happen way earlier in the day. It started back then at Starbucks. I always tell this story. And no offense to anybody who... no offense to anybody who orders pumpkin spice lattes or anything like that, but... I was driving to a meeting, and I was kind of cutting it close, but I was tired as hell, and I wanted to get a coffee, right? So I pulled up into a Starbucks because I see it, and I'm like, there's only one car there. This is going to work. I'm going to get there. It's going to be, I only need a black coffee. I just want a black coffee. That's all I want. I pull up, and I order my black coffee. They say, pull forward, and this dude in the window, he's there for he's at the window for 5-6 minutes, and I'm thinking, what the hell, man? And in my head, I'm thinking, I bet this is one of those pumpkin spice bitches. This is a long time ago. But pumpkin spice is really, really popular around this time. So, some of you may be out there. Sorry about that. Anyway, the point is, I'm sitting there, I'm waiting, and I'm like, God, I'm freaking out. I'm ready to beep the horn, and they trap your ass in there, man. They really do. They got these huge, unforgiving curbs, and you get stuck, and now there's people behind me. So I'm stuck here. I'm getting late, and I'm getting frustrated. Sure enough, I see them get a bunch of pinkety drinkety stuff, and there's the pumpkin spice drink, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, yep, that's it. That's it right there. It takes forever to pull off. I pull up. It's taking them forever. They're asking me a million questions. I'm getting flustered. Now I look late. Now I'm worried about judgment. And then I show up to the meeting and everybody's already there, already ready. And I'm embarrassed. I look stupid. It goes on and on and on and on. You see, but that's where it started is the point. It started back then with the pinkety drinkety bullshit. and that's what created the split on your place of work or your partner later on. And it felt like it came over instantaneously, when in reality, you didn't worry about draining all of this emotion and you decided you were just going to pour it all over on this one topic or this one person. Elizabeth says, how can we stop the rage when we are in an argument? So the rage in an argument, that's borderline, it is though, borderline episode category. It may even be an episode, right? Episodes, I want to remind you, require audiences for the most part. And separation from the audience is really one of the only ways to start the decline of the roller coaster instead of ramping up, right? And that's not always easy, because a lot of times when we are raging, it's because we feel unheard. We feel unseen. But I want you to understand something here. You might be extremely mad, extremely angry. I'll tell you right now, though, you're not going to get your point across like this. You're not going to get what you want like this. And you're also going to lose stuff. You're paying to be able to do this performance, this elaborate performance where the plates are flying across the room and hitting the wall and your voice is so loud and spit is just flying out of your mouth. It's super scary for everybody. And I know you're upset in the moment, but I need you to understand this and remember this. This will not help you. And if you really want what you want, you can get it much better tomorrow. You can get it much better tomorrow. And if you're really angry, you'll still be angry tomorrow. And you could do a better job of getting what you want tomorrow. And I know you know that's true. Instead of having to pay the cost of dignity, self-respect, rapport, your reputation, all of these things, need to be able to understand what you're paying when you're getting this way. People raise their voices because we are innately tuned to the skill of, I can't hear it, let me turn it up. Happens with the TV, happens with the radio. If a mitt is standing across the football field, I'm going to yell to be heard. Do you see what I mean? But it won't actually help you be heard when the person's right in front of you. They'll just run away from you after you're done yelling. Elizabeth says, my outbursts have calmed down, but now I feel like I'm going crazy. Well, that's probably because you are starting to control yourself from the inappropriate coping mechanisms, but you're on to phase 2, which is a equally painful phase. You see, this is a different phase. You start to realize that the rest of the world just doesn't get it, and that yelling and screaming and whining and complaining and throwing fits in episodes don't actually help you get what you want. So you say, okay, well, I'm not going to make anybody else suffer anymore. I'm going to stop the outbursts. And then you realize, holy shit, I still feel bad. I'm still suffering. That's what happens. That's the next phase. You have to then learn to get over the suffering, to make peace with certain things, to let things go. That's the next phase. Joshua says, how can I bring up that the perception flipped while she is splitting? Okay, so Joshua, that's a good question, because I'll tell you right now, there is no answer, easy answer for that where I can say, do this, and she'll just snap out of it. That's not going to happen in most cases, especially if her awareness is lower. Thank you, Syl. It depends on where she is in the ladder here. But what I suggest, and has good success, you say, this is a split. I love you, and I'm here for you. I'm going to give you some time to think. And that's what you do. You back out and you give them time to think. You tell them, and then you back out. Because their initial reaction when you tell them is going to be, no, it's not. Stop blaming it on my BPD. And that is super frustrating. Imagine if somebody was always blaming this BPD stuff or your condition. You know what I mean? Imagine if they were always blaming you all the time. Even when you were wrong, you would start getting upset and defensive. And we have a lack of self. A very fragile sense of self, to the point where we don't like it to be threatened. And it's much easier for us to just, dismiss it than it is to address it. But if you walk out of the room after you deliver this news and you're very kind about it, you remind them that you love them and you're there, that is one of the best ways for us to start, well, maybe they're right, Sarah. Yeah, it's like a ninja name. Sarai How do you deal with emptiness and sadness? Sadness is the worst emotion. I can't barely stand it. Well, the depression is a sign that, just like anxiety, it's a sign that something needs to change. That's what that is. People jump very quickly to things like antidepressants. And a lot of times that's because sometimes they think they don't have the power to change their life. But I'm not on any medications. And I'll tell you that when depression's kicking in, it's just a sign that something isn't right in your life. And you need to look at your life and say, well, what do I want? A lot of us have just wallowed in pain and self-pity and suffering, and we've remained that victim of whom is not focused so much on actually fixing things or generating a better life. Instead, we end up focused on the sadness and how it's unfair and how bad it hurts and how tough things have been. I need you to ask yourself, Sarah, how much time am I spending upset about my problems, and how much time am I spending focusing on solutions? Because the solution to the sadness is building a life that's happy. That's the solution. For you, that's going to look a lot different than someone else. But have you ever asked yourself, have you sat down and had a conversation, what do I really want with my life? What would make me happy? What would be an ideal world? And I'm not talking about, shooting for the moon here. I'm not saying you have to say, I'll only be happy if I'm president of the United States. I'll only be happy if I blah, blah, blah. Everybody thinks that way. I'll only be happy if. I only be happy when. Like, that's a tough way to live. It's tough on yourself. It's doing yourself an injustice because you're stealing away from the journey. And the journey is part of the process, and we need to find joy in the journey. I mean, that's like everybody saying, I'll be happy when I retire. I mean, what the hell? Like, you're just going to go through your whole job, go through your whole life, go through your whole relationship, hating everything. I mean, it's about time we start having gratitude and focusing on the things that we do have and working on it, right? Good morning, AJ. I see you in here. Mrs. Potts, how can the deep depression be alleviated? The deep depression is alleviated by building and curating a life that you want to live. Depression, I'm going to say this. Thanks, AJ. I'm going to say this, okay? And this is right in line with Vitality here, who says I am choosing to be happy. Depression. I might get a little hate out of this, okay? And there is such a thing as grief. Grief is different than depression. Somebody passes away, that's you got to go through the stages, right? Depression, chronic depression especially, is a choice, in my opinion. It is a choice, in my opinion. And I say that because I work with people who have this condition all day, all the time. And there are epiphanies, there are moments, just like there were for me, where you have gone from being chronically, critically depressed for years to all of a sudden instantaneously hopeful. Like somebody reached into your brain and just, fixed it. You see what I'm saying? But you have to have hope. You have to have a feeling that there is something worth living for. And that has to be something that's great enough to get out of bed in the morning. And this part sounds kind of shitty, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that just your kids or just your partner, it's not enough. It's not enough. I see plenty of parents, plenty of partners who have amazing partners or amazing kids, and they're still chronically depressed and struggle to get out of bed. It's not enough. You have to have a purpose. You have to have a drive deep down that you mean something to the world. And you do, especially if you have this condition. You have no idea what kind of beacon of light you actually are. Think about it. Riki says, good morning to you. How do I overcome the anger at family who have betrayed me when it comes to funerals? I presume you mean there is a funeral coming up and you have to see family that you have split on due to either real or perceived betrayal. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. My question to you is, why does it actually matter? If if out of a room full of cavemen, you are the only one who can make fire, are you really going to deny everybody else the opportunity to learn and not teach them just because they were selfish in their preparation and building process? Somewhere you have to be able to rise up above all of this drama and bullshit. You really do. You have to look different at the world and at the people in it and at the past. The past doesn't even matter anymore. Firstly, it's your responsibility to build a future that you want to live, and I presume that having the choice, having family in it that loves you and you love them is part of that. You might be the only one in the scenario who is capable mentally of fixing it. You might be the only one working on yourself. And I know it's unfair that, oh, well, they did this and they betrayed me. I mean, my dad wasn't around my whole entire life almost. You know, he was just alcohol and pot were more important. You see? Thanks, Sil. But as I got older and I decided to make peace with it, I said, you know what? These people all did the best they could. They did the best that they could in the moment. So, honestly, I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad if somebody is weaker. I'm not mad if somebody doesn't have a certain skill that I might have. I'm not upset if I am the bigger person. I just want to make a world where everybody's comfortable, everybody's happy, and out of everybody that's involved, you just showing up and pretending like it doesn't matter is the best move, in my opinion. Pay the respects. I'm sorry for your loss, by the way. I really am. Everybody says that, but the grief, you have to go through the grief on your own, and me saying sorry really isn't going to help you any. I know you know that already. But something that will help you, Riki, is the support of family of whom will be at the funeral. If I were you, I'd probably ring one of them up, and I wouldn't talk about the past unless they bring it up, and I would have I made peace with it, it's all good, let's just build a future, because nobody really likes friction. And if you have done things of which you are embarrassed by, if that's part of this, take accountability and responsibility, but remember that blame, shame, guilt, and embarrassment have no productive value whatsoever, and it doesn't make sense to focus on things from that perspective. Focus on it from the accountability and responsibility perspective. Show up with your chin up high and, your shoulders back, and be very kind and a source of joy in the room, and show these people that you are a beam of light. That's the answer. Thank you, Sil. Thor says, what should I do if my partner is well aware about my triggers but still does it? She's my favorite person. Well, I'll tell you first, this part's going to be harder to hear, Thor, but this is the honest truth. It is not up to your partner to dance around your triggers. That's called walking on eggshells. The reason that you prefer it that way is because you want to be able to control the outcome, and you're scared of whatever the triggers are. And there's a difference between somebody mistreating you and triggers from the perspective of what I believe we're talking about here. I would, for example, my wife, she works in HVAC around a bunch of men, right? Well, that's a trigger for us BPD people, because those are perceived romantic threats, right? Even though they're not. When I wasn't in remission, I made her quit her job because that was a trigger. You see what I'm saying? I made her quit her job, and then she was like, jobless for a year, and I did it under the guise of, come work with me, I need help with my businesses. I've always run businesses. Really, I was scared, and I was trying to control the situation to avoid the risk of losing her at work, because I was scared. And if she would mention, I really miss my job or whatever, I would throw fits. And I would think, dude, why do you keep bringing up jobs and other men and blah, blah, blah? Don't bring these things up, and then we won't have a problem. That's her having to walk on eggshells and and live in fear so that I'm more comfortable. And if you truly care about this favorite person in your partner, which I believe you do, it's time to focus on the accountability and responsibility and where you may be responsible for perspective changes, right? And I know that's a scary thing. I get that. If you want some help with that, please do reach out to me, send me an email, tell me the full story, explain what's going on. I'll help you walk through all of this, okay? Elizabeth, are there any therapies that you would suggest? I have done over 4,000 hours of therapy myself. So firstly, I'm going to start by saying, if something's working for you, great. I found none of them effective. I did a 9-month DBT program that cost me thousands of dollars. I've done several DBT programs. I've done CBT programs, MBT programs, group therapy, individual therapy, workbooks, all sorts of programs online, just a bunch of different stuff. None of it worked. It's actually why I do what I do now. I am a BPD coach, and I have a program called the BPD Remission Program. It is a 2-month program, and it is very successful in getting people into full remission within 2 months or less. So please do reach out, and I will tell you more. I wish that I could read that. I'm sorry, but I'm not cultured enough to read the name. So my apologies. Wait. It's the first time I realized that me as BPD, I'm a control freak because I am scared. Yeah, well, I had that moment too, man. I had that moment too. The awareness ladder is an interesting ladder to climb. It's very interesting because each rung is met with its own new fear, okay? And the fears never stop all the way up until you get to a place where you are solid and you feel good and you have a sense of self and you have learned how to problem solve all of this BPD nonsense. There's fear behind every single move. I like to think about it from the perspective of, and don't feel bad about the control freak part. Instead, do something about it. Instead of feeling bad, which is guilt, which is just going to guilt everyone around you into trying to coddle you. That's back ass words, I'm going to control you, and then I'm going to make you feel bad that I controlled you so that you comfort me. Unproductive, okay? So focus on the productivity. But anyway, I like to look at it like this. It's kind of like you're in a train. You start out in the back of the train when you first realize that you have this condition. And you have to move to the front of the train, but every single car that you're moving into has a new fear in it. Something scary in each one. And it's like it never stops until you get to the front, and you don't know how many you have to go through. Fortunately, I do know, and I'm easily able to detect exactly where you are in the train, so to say. So do reach out, tell me your story, let me know exactly what's going on, and I will tell you what I think. I will tell you how I feel about it, and I'll tell you where I think you are, because I see it from above. I can see where you are. I can see how many are in front. I know what's in them. I'm quite good at that. It's one of the only things I am good at is helping people solve these kinds of things. Mrs. Potts says, what can help when someone with BPD has split to more NPD traits? Still the same answer typically, because you can't control somebody. If you're like the partner in the situation, right? You're looking at things from the outside. You're not the BPD person. It's very difficult early in the stages for you to be able to help them come out of it. Now, when they're working on the journey and they're developing skills and they're like when a client is working with me and we've been working together for a month or longer, and their partner's also in the partner program and they're working with me too, we get to a place where we really can approach them and say things and come up with outcomes. Thank you, Nicole. Good to see you, as always. But until that happens, you won't be able to convince them. They're just going to keep pushing you away or continue the narcissistic abusive side of it. It really is what it is. I was, emotionally and mentally abusive and tormenting my partner throughout these kinds of splits and whatnot. Looking back at it, that's what it was. So, and the more that she engaged with me, the more abuse she got from me. It wasn't helpful for her to continue to push or try to convince me of anything. That did not help me. You know what I mean? That didn't help her. Space and time is the answer still, but telling them that you love them, you can tell them, something's not right here. I know you love me too, but I'm going to give you some space. I'm going to let you think. And then you exit and you step away. When you're chasing someone, they have two options, basically. Turn around and talk to you or run. And somebody who's embarrassed, upset, or feels threatened, they're not going to talk nicely. They're going to defend themselves or they're going to run, right? And trying to accept that that's the truth can help you move forward a little faster. Because I think a lot of times the partners and the parents and the friends, we all seem to think that we could do something about it. If we care more, we might be able to find different words that they'll hear us. It's so funny because that's exactly the BPD perspective too. You flip around and you look at the BPD side of it. I'm like complaining and bitching this person out who I supposedly love, and they love me, and I'm telling them they don't love me and how I feel unloved because I think that they're going to be able to help me. That's why that was happening back then. The day that I realized that nobody can help me get out of this, like they can't come into my brain and they can't say magic words and help me fix this, is the day that I stopped taking my episodes out on everyone. Kitty Nip says, I noticed sticking to the facts instead of emotions helps me get through it to my BPD husband. That can help, but sometimes... Sorry, needed some milk. That can help, but sometimes it could backfire for some of us. I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes it has the opposite effect. When we start feeling stupid or embarrassed, I remember I would argue and argue and argue and argue for hours and hours and hours with my partner. And then I started to make no sense eventually. The things coming out of my mouth, they were clearly stupid. You know what I mean? I would say stuff that was just plain wrong. And then my partner would perk up when that happened, and they'd say, but what about this? And I'm like, oh, now I'm stupid. Now I'm just an idiot. Oh, I'm so worthless. You're totally right. And it's one thing after the other, remaining in that victim mode, not focused on the solution, of which I think the solution before remission, I always thought was everybody else needs to change. Everybody else needs to get fixed. You need to do this different. You need to shut the hell up. You should have apologized. And now I'm mad. I mean, even if they did make a mistake, though, even if they did do something wrong, you need to spend some time investigating their intention. You see what I mean? Because if you don't, it's almost like we operate under the ideology that they wanted to hurt us. They wanted to harm us. They want us to feel pain and suffering. This person that's committed to us and with us and devoted to us somehow wants us to feel pain. I mean, if that's really true, then you should leave the relationship, but you don't because you know that it's not true. You see? Thank you, Sue. Good to see you this morning. And that said, hold on. When I just... What are we talking about here? I'm sorry. All right. Yeah, okay. I just read the comment. Mrs. Potts, my wife seems to have ostrich syndrome. She knows she has BPD, but believes nothing helps. Yeah, well, we lose hope, especially when we're older. The older we get, the less hope we have, and that makes sense. There is something that happens psychologically when you experience failure over and over again, of which if you've had BPD, you've been failing your whole life probably, because that's how it is. We have these inappropriate coping mechanisms. We know they're wrong. Society ostracizes us for it, The result of that is expecting failure, of which produces more failure. The more failure you expect, the more you produce. The more you produce, the more you expect. It becomes very hard to get out. You have to find something that is hopeful. That's why I do what I do. I do what I do because from my perspective, there was very little hope out there. There were very few people who set up a lighthouse and said that there is a way out of this. You still can't force the horse to drink water. You could give him the option. You could point him in the right direction. You can try. But something I've learned after working with all the people, all of us that I have, is some people want it and they're willing to change. Some people don't want it at all. Some people are willing to change but say they don't want it. Some people say they want it and they are willing to change. There's just all these different scales here. And it's very easy for somebody to say, I want to do this, I want to get better, and then do nothing different, But remember, nothing changes if nothing changes. Thanks for all the comment work, Amit. You're doing a great job, buddy. I know sometimes it's probably like super frustrating when I get stuck in a rabbit hole here and you have to repin these. My bad, buddy. Thanks for keeping up with me. Priscilla, good to see you, Priscilla. Why does my boyfriend always say the same things that he wants from me or us, but doesn't follow through? Well, I would say there's fear in the way, fear and habit. I don't know exactly what those things are, but I'm willing to bet that behind each thing that would be good for you guys, and he's not doing it, he's scared of something. I'd say he's scared of something. And I'd say the other part is habits are very tough to break. Just as I say, it takes 21 days to form a habit. It also takes 21 days to break a habit. So, the bad stuff, you have to not do it for 21 days. The good stuff, you have to do it for 21 days. You do it long enough, it becomes a personality trait. So stay positive and maybe target smaller goals. Smaller goals, easier ones to obtain. To start, don't aim for everything overnight, especially not the huge stuff. Get some wins under their belt. You know what I mean? B says, if your partner doesn't seek help, what can you do? Well, you can't force them to get help, obviously. They have to come to terms that it is necessary. I think that this part sucks, but your withdrawal and how you influence the situation is really the only thing you can control. So I always suggest setting a good example. Never do the stuff that they do. Don't yell, don't scream, don't fight. When they're fighting, listen. And then when you feel a loss of dignity, leave the room. I love you, I'm sorry, you think, I'm out. You leave. They'll throw a fit, but you can't control that, and you cannot let them abuse you. You can't just sit back and let them abuse you. You have to have the courage to be able to step outside and walk away. You have to have the courage to let them go sometimes. And it sucks that it sucks that this is true, but oftentimes people will only change when things are absolutely terrible and they just can't take it anymore. When tragedy hits, that's when change happens most of the time. So sometimes you'll notice that the change won't occur until they do get hit with an ultimatum or the perception of loss of you, for instance. Phoenix says, why do we always perceive maybe as a yes? Oh, that's a good one, Okay, so there's a good analogy for this. I don't know, I can't remember the name of the psychologist that did it or said it, but it goes like this. There are two kids in the back seat, and I've been in this exact scenario. And they're in the car, and the parents are driving, and they say, "Dad, can we get ice cream on the way home?" And Dad says, "Maybe." Maybe is not no. Maybe is a possible yes. So we have a confirmation bias kind of slant towards yes. There's a small spike of dopamine that ensues. In which case, we are excited. We are excited about this, because we might get what we want. We might get what we want. A better answer is, I don't know. Not maybe, but I don't know. Okay? And I'm trying to help you understand that maybe is an I don't know. It's just that because it might mean yes, and it's so commonly leads to yeses, especially for children, these kids get that small peak. Now, unfortunately, when it turns out that you don't get the ice cream, the kids then have a dopamine crash that goes far lower than they were before the whole thing started. But it's because we perceive maybe as a future that we want It's validating a future that we want. I think that a better approach is to lean on action that is more likely to get you what you want. For example, if when I was a kid I said, hey guys, my sister and I would really like ice cream on the way home, and we talked about it, and we thought that maybe we could, mow the front yard or rake the leaves in the backyard or do the dishes and whatever. Do you think maybe we could get ice cream? They'd probably be more likely to say yes a lot of the time, right? Because they're like, that's different. I've influenced the scenario by introducing my own variable to it, of which is a positive thing, and I'm earning it and all of that. So I would say lean towards influencing your situation, of which you have more control and more power over than you might think. Some of the things that you could do to influence your situation you haven't thought of because you spent too much time worried about what life's going to be like when you don't get what you want, or somebody leaves, or, fill in the blank, right? But you have the power to influence things. And negotiation and compromise, sometimes it starts with the words that come out of your mouth. You don't have to wait for some sit-down meeting to be able to compromise whether or not people want to do something. You can start the compromise. You could start the negotiation. It's all circumstantial. Sometimes it's worth it to also collect data. And I think the data collection part makes compromises more reasonable. For example, in the same example I've given with the ice cream, if I would say, hey, how long does it take to get home? And then they say, about 25 minutes. And I say, okay. And what do you guys have to do later when we get home? And then they say, oh, well, we got to do all this work and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm already less likely to get ice cream, right? I also have an opportunity to pick some of the stuff out they have to do and maybe offer to do it for them in exchange freeing up their time and getting the ice cream. You see what I mean? But if I just blurt out in the back seat, can we stop and get ice cream on the way home? I mean, the chances are much less than if I have taken time to collect data, build a foundation, figured out what they want, figured out, what the obstacles might be in getting what I want, and then trying to modify the scenario so that I might be more likely to get some of or all of what I want while also satisfying the other parties involved. Yeah, well, you can apply that to anything in life. You can apply that at your work with your boss. You can apply that with your coworkers. You can apply that with your kids, your parents, your partners, yourself. I mean, really, it's a universal skill. I'm trying to have people understand the skills get you through stuff, right? It's like a Band-Aid kind of thing, but a good Band-Aid, as opposed to the inappropriate coping mechanisms, which are bad Band-Aids, right? The skills are like good Band-Aids, but they're still Band-Aids. Ultimately, you always need to gain the perspective change that lies underneath that you're missing. That is the answer to stopping the emotional buildup from triggers permanently. The reason that, for instance, I don't emotionally respond to being disrespected is because I had a perspective change about the disrespect trigger. It's not because I instantly practice a skill. People, they try to disrespect me all the time. Here in chat sometimes and video comments, all the time. It's like, and I would never be able to take that like back in the day. There'd be no way. I mean, if I tried to coach for BPD like 10 years ago, I would have made it to like 100 followers, and then I would have had a total internet meltdown. I would be like the next greatest meme, or like, those Vines or whatever. I'd be like a crazy person on TikTok, and I'd be famous for that. Like guaranteed, all right? Which is hilarious. Thank you, Sil. I appreciate you guys. The gifts that you guys give go towards our advertising budget for the lives, so they help get more people in here who need help. You never know. I say it because we all know what it's like to be in that dark room, We all know what it's like to be alone. Thank you, Sil. Very generous. We know what it's like not to have someone, and we know what it's like to be unaware But you may be helping someone get in here who has no idea they have BPD, and this is the first time they're hearing it. You might be helping a partner or a parent get in here who has nowhere else to turn, doesn't understand the condition, and needs more help, right? You might be helping somebody who is already well on their mission but has a few hangups. Regardless, I appreciate it all, and trust me, so do they. So do they. I love showing up here, and I can see everybody else does too. Otherwise, we all wouldn't be, showing up every day. I see the same people, and it tells me this is a good place. It's a place for growth. The splitting thing it's a tough topic. That's one of the hallmark features of this condition. This is why we talk about this, at least once every few weeks. I try to talk about splitting. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, guys. And sometimes you may be in a split. So I want to remind you that there is no room for guilt, blame, shame, embarrassment, or fault here in terms of getting better. There's accountability and responsibility. And if you have split on people in your life, and you can identify that you've done it out of, fear, embarrassment, judgment, whatever it may be, maybe they didn't really deserve it. Maybe you know that. You could do something about it. You can make the effort to try and make it right. That ship has not sailed, most likely. You do have to understand that they might not want to accept an apology, for instance. But I'll tell you what, I have lived for years after splitting on some people, and it tormented me like a ghost until I tried to fix it. Sometimes I was able to, sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes they listened to me, sometimes they didn't. But I always felt better when I tried to correct some of the mistakes I'd made in the past. Making the mistakes right is a cathartic process. It truly is. Kayla says, has anyone else ever had a significant other blame you for why you didn't get diagnosed sooner? I've heard of that some. I have heard of that some. And one of the natural reasons that happens is because your partner's often shouting in the background, please get help, do something about this, you have problems, you need help. And that's unproductive. It's unproductive because it comes across as an attack. There are easier ways to get somebody on board with a treatment protocol, and really sometimes it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of waiting it out. It is a matter of just grinding the days until you get to a good place, and then they're willing to accept that maybe there's something up. I know that this condition takes a lot out on everyone involved. It's not just the person with BPD. It's everybody who's in the BPD person's life. It's very tough to live with this condition. So if you are struggling, you're in the right place. You can reach out to me, shoot me an email. There's a button in my profile to make it easy, and I'll help you whatever way I possibly can. Don't be shy. If you don't know what to say, just say hi. I'll know what to say to you. If we've missed your question or comment, it wasn't intentional. There's a lot going on here. I myself can't keep up very well with the chat. That's why we have my awesome friend Amit here, Sensitive Stability Coach, who you see pinned right now, reminding us that we go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST here on TikTok. Each morning we talk about a different topic related to BPD, with the exception of Fridays. Fridays is a great day to show up if you have a lot of questions, because that is just a question answer live. So I'm basically letting the chat kind of rule the I almost called it an episode. I try not to call these episodes because, we have episodes as BPD people. So, whatever. Live sessions, morning lives. The Friday morning lives are for you to be able to be better seen and better heard, so definitely show up then. You're all very welcome. I'm always very happy to see the same people in here. It tells me that I'm doing something right at least, and maybe making a small impact that you might need. I want to remind you that you do have more control over your day than you think. I know that it's tough, and I know that sometimes things are really, really bad, but it doesn't mean that you have to wallow in that terrible feeling. Instead, you could be doing stuff about it, and it doesn't take fixing everything overnight to make life better. All it takes is just fixing one small thing today, just a tiny small thing. You fix that small thing today, today is slightly better than yesterday. You do that enough times, and eventually everything is right. That said, I will see you all tomorrow, 7 a.m. US EST. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, guys.